You're listening to Secure Freedom Radio.
Now more from Frank Gaffney.
This is indeed Frank Gaffney. Welcome to Secure Freedom Radio, but more importantly, welcome to a conversation with a truly great American. Senator Jim DeMint of South Carolina, member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, man who has contributed, I think, with increasing effect on a great number of issues, particularly relevant to the future of this country, the sovereignty and the character of America. Will it be as we've known it, or will it be something very different? In fact, that's really the subject of a new best-selling book by Senator DeMint entitled, provocatively, Saving Freedom. Sounds a little bit like securing freedom, doesn't it? But, well, anyway, Saving Freedom. We can stop America's slide into socialism. Senator, welcome to Secure Freedom Radio. We are thrilled to have you with us.
Well, Frank, I'm honored to be on your show, and thank you for what you do every day to get the truth out across the country.
Well, listen, it's an opportunity to thank each other, but the more important thing is I want to give you an opportunity right here to talk about something that's a little outside of the lane, as we say in government, of our Secure Freedom Radio portfolio. But on the other hand, it is so directly relevant to something that's really central to our work, namely good governance. Tell us about health care and your comment, which has gotten a tremendous amount of play, I have to say, that the outcome of the president's efforts to ram something through, really without respect to what it says, but just ram something through, could be, I think, as you put it, his Waterloo, the opportunity to break him. He seems to have taken some umbrage at that, and I'd like to give you an opportunity to revise and extend your remarks, as they say.
Well, thank you. I'm tempted to say what I just heard the president say in his news conference after he slandered the the Massachusetts police officer. He said, perhaps I could have calibrated my words differently or something like that. But anyway.
Well, I'm not urging you to retract them, Senator.
No,
I just want you to further illuminate on them. Good.
What's happened, Frank, is that this president has been a train out of control since he took office, and he's made a lot of bold promises about stopping the growth of unemployment, and he rammed through this stimulus package that his promises have not hooked up with his policy, and frankly it seems to be hurting jobs in America and taking money out of the private economy where jobs are created. And now he's here on health care. He's been trying to ram this through before people even read it. And Frank, he is not trying to improve health insurance or make it available to everyone, because he voted against everything we tried to do when he was in the Senate that would have made insurance more competitive and affordable and accessible to every American. But what I said when I said this could be his Waterloo, and in fact it needs to be in effect, because if we don't stop him on health care, if he's able to essentially socialize nearly 20% of our economy, take it over at the federal level, he's going to go right through that on to cap and trade, which is a huge energy tax, electricity tax. He's going to just keep moving towards taking away secret ballot of workers. He's promised that to unions. And he's got this very left-wing agenda that he's going to keep plowing through until we stop him. So right. I think the health care issue is a real showdown here in America, and my hope is that it could be his Waterloo, that we can stop him on this.
Senator, you were talking to Senator Jim DeMint of South Carolina on Secure Freedom Radio with Frank Gaffney. We're discussing Waterloo, a term that may not mean a lot to a lot of people. Of course, it was where Napoleon was stopped. And it's important to just, I think, further embellish the point you've just made, if you would, for a moment, by noting that when the president, and Rahm Emanuel and others on his side argue that, well, this is just politics. The Republicans are just engaged in some kind of nefarious partisan effort. What you're really saying, and I think your book, Saving Freedom, does such a marvelous job of depicting, is you're fighting for the highest of stakes, which is not just, partisan political gain. You're talking about preserving America.
You're exactly right. I'm not trying to break him personally. I like him, and this is not political for me. If you read Saving Freedom, I'm critical of what both parties have done. Mm-hmm. This is really about saving our country and what so many have fought and died for. If the government controls most of our economic activity in our country, that's socialism, and it has destroyed so many countries. It's difficult for me to believe we're even considering a government takeover of health care, but I, for one, am going to do everything I can to stop the president on this, hoping that it would move him back to the middle on many other issues if we could slow him down on health care.
Yeah, I suspect you're very right about that. Can we just dwell on this for a minute? Because, again, I think an awful lot of people, even in this sophisticated, secure Freedom Radio listening audience, Senator DeMint, are probably not really certain what you mean when you talk about socialism. What is it?
Well, I spend a couple of chapters in Saving Freedom just helping people see the difference between a country based on the principles of freedom, as America has always been, and one that's based on the principles of government-centric collectivism, kind of tops-down management. You can see a socialist approach in the stimulus bill. Instead of leaving the money in the productive economy where it's being produced by small businesses and individuals who are working, we took the money out. It will ultimately be $1 trillion, and spend it through government, which is central planning, which all of the critics of socialism will point to central planning and political management of economic activity as the reason so many nations have destroyed themselves.
Right.
And so there's a
unrelieved failure, basically, I think, is the formula that one could use.
And I write about the siren song of socialism because it's so tempting to say, well, every child needs an education. Let's make it free and let the government do it. Or everyone wants health care, so let's make it free and let the government do it. And I'm just trying to warn Americans that this talk, these promises, have never come true before. You can't cite a government program that has worked effectively. Yeah. Some people may say Social Security and Medicare has worked for seniors. It has worked for this generation of seniors, but it's put trillions of dollars of debt onto the next generation. It has been very poorly managed.
Right, and I think this is what I believe you, Senator DeMint, deserve so much credit for doing is looking past the moment, and again this complaint that you're just engaged in politics is so undeserved, because I think you really are trying to make sure that this next generation is not saddled with not only a burden, an unbelievable financial burden, but a loss of freedom. Right. That those of us who have enjoyed freedom and prosperity for these many years, do not have any right to bequeath to them. But let me just segue, because I know we're going to run out of time long before we run out of really important stuff to visit with you, Senator Jim DeMint from South Carolina, about. But one of the object lessons in the failure of socialism, with not only economic lessons to be learned, but the most important of strategic lessons, is Venezuela. And you have spent a lot of time as a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, I know, looking at, thinking about, worrying about what's happening, notably in the context of Honduras, which we'll come to in a moment. Right. But just tell us a little bit about what Hugo Chavez has done to Venezuela as he has imposed, a pretty aggressive form of socialism on that country and its people.
Well, it's what you call democratic socialism. I write about it in the book, that democracy is often used as just to legitimize a power grab. And Chavez was elected through questionable means, but then he changed the Constitution so that he could be in there more than one term, and has effectively set himself up as a dictator and called it a democracy. Right. He's trying to do the same thing in Honduras through his influence, but when Chavez has taken over a lot of the industry there in Venezuela, a country that was one of the most prosperous and democratic. Yeah, in Central and South America, and now we've got a situation where he's becoming a wealthy enemy of the United States in a very strategic position, and it obviously affected Nicaragua, working with Castro, and was working to overturn the Constitution in Honduras, when the Supreme Court there and the Congress and the Attorney General acted to throw Zelaya out, who was the president at that time. But they wrote their Constitution so specifically to avoid what has happened in Venezuela that a president who tries to change the Constitution is automatically removed from the presidency. I mean, He removes himself.
Right.
I've been so disappointed in our administration for coming down on the side with Castro and Chavez and Ortega. It's just pretty amazing to me that they don't recognize that this poor, small country that's been such a great ally of the United States followed their Constitution and threw out a president that was trying to overturn the Constitution.
Yeah. Senator Jim DeMint of South Carolina here on Secure Freedom Radio with Frank Gaffney. You are on YouTube, among other places, very articulately talking about this travesty of the United States lining up with the wrong people against freedom in our hemisphere, and I commend that to you. Also, SecureFreedomRadio.com will have links to your site, DeMint, I believe it is, .senate.gov, and SupportFreeHonduras.com, another site I've just tumbled on. But before we run out of time, Senator, just very quickly, you've also written, in addition to this terrific new book, Saving Freedom, a book entitled Why We Whisper, Restoring Our Right to Say It's Wrong. And I just would like to have you spend a little bit of time talking with the Secure Freedom Radio listening audience about the possibility that hate crimes legislation, now reaching its denouement in the Congress, may engender new limitations on our freedom of speech and all that is so central to the rest of our freedoms as a result.
Well, Why We Whisper, I wrote it with the university professor Dave Woodard, and we did a lot of research on the actions the government has taken that effectively takes away the freedom of speech for traditional Americans who believe, because of their religious faith, because they're just moral convictions, that some things are wrong and some things are right. But we point out how the government is basically promoting destructive behaviors and attacking very productive behaviors such as prayer or even saying the Pledge of Allegiance. We see what the government has done in attacking the Boy Scouts for having God in their pledge and setting their own standards. But we make the case in the book that the government is reshaping our culture and taking away our right to say that things are wrong. And by doing it, it is setting the lowest standard possible, the lowest common denominator for our culture, instead of what a free culture that's allowed to practice religious freedom does, which they set the standards at very high, and we go by the highest aspirations if we're free. And that doesn't mean we're all the same religion or have the same moral beliefs, but there's a pervasive culture, and we've had it in our country up until the last 30 or 40 years, that made America the most compassionate, and I think that what de Tocqueville said, a good nation. That's why we were great.
Yes, God bless him and God bless America. Senator DeMint, thank you so much for this important contribution to our understanding. We're going to want you back, I know, to talk about other ways in which our freedom of speech might be circumscribed. But for the moment, we're going to move on to another very important topic with Ann Corcoran, our go-to resource on refugee resettlement issues. Stay tuned.
You're listening to Secure Freedom Radio with Frank Gaffney.